Is the year that will be remembered as the one when Hollywood came to Scotland, then packed up and went elsewhere. But one star remained to chase the deer, that modern-day Jacobite, that piscivorous performer, that maestro of Marillion is now swimming against the tide of musics and manipulators. He is Scotland's answer to Michael. He is Fish. He was part of the jock rock phenomenon of the 1980s and penned memorable ditties such as Lavender, Cayley and Communicado. He has come here tonight to communicate rock and roll is dead. Fish, will you state your case?
Hiya. But I should really change the phrase in this. The spirit of rock and roll is actually dead. Since the 70s, I mean, you know, if you think back to the 50s and 60s and James Dean and Marlon Brando and that sense of rebelliousness and you know, that free spirit that was about in it, that's gone now. In the 70s, it started to sell itself out. In the 80s, it moved even further. But I mean, in the 90s nowadays, what we're looking at is a music business that's run by lawyers and accountants, and it's run by corporate executives who have sensed the amount of money that can be made out of the business. And in doing so, they're manipulating the creative artistry. They're manipulating, you know, that spirit of rebellion, and what they're doing now is just turning it into sort of audio wallpaper, which we are being sold by various promotion and marketing executives who come from various companies that sell sanitary towels and soft drinks. And they convince you that what you're doing is buying the right thing and you're buying something that is valuable. But what has actually happened is that the great mass of public is now starting to turn off. I mean, through the computer game phenomenon, which stole a lot of the teenagers about 5 years ago, we're now in a situation where nobody actually really trusts the media, be it the press or radio or whatever, and we are now sitting in a case where music is just dying off and nobody really believes that it's going to change the world as some people thought in the 60s.
I mean... Fish, you started off that argument by saying that, the spirit of rock and roll used to be about rebelliousness and about anger.
Yeah.
Is it not just a case of perhaps that at the time when the terms of the rock and roll that you identified with, it may well have been rebellious and it was anger, you no longer find that in the present day music, but perhaps people, when they're buying it, aren't looking for a sense of rebelliousness or a sense of anger. They're just looking for music that they enjoy.
No, I think there's always been you know, a sense of identification. I mean, if you want to look at in the case of, you know, let's wander into the wonderful world of the adolescent.
You'll have to cast your mind back.
Cast my mind back, yeah. But I mean, I think generally, you know, adolescents, you know, when people are going through, you know, early teenagedom or whatever, and you've got the questions about sex, religion, where I am in the world, what is the meaning of life and stuff. There's that whole confusion that I think people used to identify with in rock and roll. And I think because rock and roll, people were creating music, trying to find themselves, you know, but yeah, it was like a sort of analysis in a 4x4 beat or whatever. And
are you saying modern day rock and roll?
I'm talking about, this is the journalism of music, right? I'm talking about adolescents tend to look at music or looked at music and they identified with it, which is why it's sort of like self-perpetuated. But what's happening now is, I think, you know, a lot of the angst and stuff is sort of taken out of it. It's been
I mean, I've heard this argument advanced before by people like Richard Jobson. It appears to me to be really rather elitist because what it really is saying is that when I was young, yes, we asked questions and there was a sense of anger and rebelliousness, and they then sort of turned it into a sort of argument against the youth of today.
Yeah, but you can sense this.
Isn't the point here that in terms of the motivation for perhaps why people bought records, it's changed over the last 20, 25 years?
What I'm actually talking about is the manipulation at the stages of creativity. And what you're talking about, I mean, you know, we have situations in America where they're not interested in taking anybody who has like 2 or 3 albums behind them. They're wanting something new. They try and sort of synthesize the youth and the passion that is the music, and they try and create this, they market it.
But at the end of the day, there's got to be a market for that.
Yeah, but the music business, you've got to remember that the music business was never really a business. The music business was a sort of enclave that a lot of people worked into in order to sort of escape. I mean, you could call it responsibility, whatever. But a lot of people in the music business in the early 70s and in the late 60s were people that sort of got drawn into it because of the excitement. But what's happened is that the accountants have come through the top floor, a bit like, you know, Aliens 2 or 3 or whatever it was, and they've sort of come down and they've taken over because they've sensed the money that can be made out of it in the same way as many other aspects.
You seem to be complaining there about an infrastructure which perhaps from your point of view actually conspires against talent, and where they have a particular direction in which they want to go. But the point that I'm making at the end of the day is that people have to go out and they have to buy the CDs and they have to buy the records, and at the end of the day, surely, if there is a sense of anger or rebelliousness which isn't being reflected in modern-day rock and roll, if there was a market for that, and if people wanted to buy it, surely the people who are controlling this structure would move into it, because by your own definition, there's money in it. Yeah, because I think there's a sense of apathy, and there's a sense of mistrust that's come about it because of the way it has been marketed and the way that has been promoted, especially in the last 5 years. I mean, it's all short-term thinking, short-term gain now. But what they do is they synthesise what they consider to be the original spirit, and they try and contain it. I mean, they cage it. In the same way as, I mean, I think it's indicative in the way that there's a lot of bands nowadays. I mean, you're looking at bands like Suede that are, you know, they do one album and all of a sudden you've got crucial members of the band leaving. Alice in Chains, you know, splitting up after only a couple of albums. You know, bands are not staying. I mean, you know, Nirvana, you've got a guy shooting himself after they've only performed 2 albums and done a heck of a lot of touring, but in short terms, because the turnover is so fast. OK, let's get to the audience. I think they're itching to get in here.
So does rock and roll still exist?
Oh, it still does.
Yeah. Out of interest, when was the last record you made?
It came out in May this year.
Yeah. How far did it get?
What?
How far did it get in the charts?
It was #1 in the independent album charts and #18 in the main charts.
Yeah. Right. I think what Fish is trying to say is it's not actually rock and roll that's dead. It's the spirit that grows within people when they hear a certain tune and they can relate to that. I mean, look at Take That. Look at the amount of kids that
do you not think there are records now that come out that just appeal to all young people across the musical spectrum?
No. Yeah, definitely, because the lawyers and accountants Fish is talking about, they're telling people to sing in a certain way. When a band starts, it starts with a certain style. It then progresses as the culture the band's fostered with each other. They progress into a different style, but they've been told not to do that. Bands are coming together, like Take That, they don't even know each other. They got together because somebody said, like, 5 young guys, short hair, look sexy, let's sing, make loads of money.
What about Nirvana? And you were mentioning Kurt and all the rest. Surely that is rock and roll. We've got, Teen Spirit, everyone's saying it's an anthem for a generation. Does that not count? Yes.
No, I don't think that's entirely true. I think when you look at the Kurt and the Nirvana rock and roll syndrome, it's become nothing other than this sex, drugs and rock and roll type scenario.
Well, wasn't that what it was all about?
No, that's not what it was all about. What Fish was saying earlier on, fair enough that was there, but there was this spirit of rebellion and this spirit of protest that was there before, and that's been pushed to the wayside while the rest of it's come storming through.
So is there any music that's rebellious then? Is there rebellious music now?
Never ever been a truly rebellious music. Punk
what about
rock,
punk? Yeah.
Punk rock, that's a nonsense to believe
What
that.
about the jam
That was
you sing about?
even a
It's like
pretense to be a rebellious music. As soon as it started off, it was commodified by the likes of Malcolm McLaren.
So
There's never been, even in the early days, way back when the Beatles and all these people were supposed to be recreating pop music, there was bands that were commodified then, right at the early stages.
So the music industry then, the music industry always has had a higher priority than music. Is it always the highest priority been to make money?
Aye, but the point was, when you listen to music like Hendrix, right, and the Beatles, there was something that you could feel and you could relate to, you know. You sat there and you thought, man, that's really funky, and it made you move. And the point is, there's very little now that makes you feel that same way. Take That sure as shit doesn't. I mean, Nirvana maybe did, but there's nothing on the same kind of level,
What
that
about your
makes you feel.
secondary school kids sitting at home angst-ridden? What do they listen to and what could they relate?